By his own words, Congress and President Trump set a time bomb that can detonate and collapse our economy in about a year.
We are sitting on a time bomb.
As a candidate, Trump said if we dare let our national debt hit $24 trillion, that would be the point of collapse, in which our economy would go down the tubes just like Greece.
You know, I've always heard and read a lot on it and understand it and went to Wharton and all of that stuff. I've always heard that $24 trillion, we become Greece.
And that's why Trump ran and won on the promise of getting rid of our national debt within 8 years.
We pay it back so easily.
How?
It's easy to pay it back.
How? But instead of paying it back, he just ran it up like a plane on a curve to the moon. Look at that staggering number, a $587 billion annual deficit. And that was the deficit in 2016 under President Obama. President Trump's budget deficits will nearly double Obama's in 2016. Instead of cutting spending, Trump cut a deal with Republicans and Democrats in Congress to escalate spending. Their plan here is to suspend borrowing limits for 2 years, to spend more than $1 trillion a year we don't have, while social insurance programs like Social Security and Medicare continue to spiral, while we are already $22 trillion in debt with no idea how to pay it back. By the way, both of Florida Senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott voted against this plan, but the president and most members of Congress said yes. It passed 284 to 149 in the House and 67 to 28 in the Senate. The president's own budget proposal projected the debt would top $24 trillion next year. And Congress just delivered, taking us on a path to a $24 trillion total debt in about a year. And remember what the president said about a $24 trillion debt.
I've always heard that $24 trillion, we become Greece.
And now here's what he means by Greece. In Greece's debt crisis, taxes doubled. 1 in 4 lost their jobs. More than 40% of the country plunged into poverty. And thankfully for Greece here, it was bailed out by the European Union. Europe would not likely bail the United States out. And if, and more likely when, the time bomb hits us, our government would have to print much more money, devaluing the money that we do have. In short, it would likely wipe out most Americans' life savings, while their taxes would likely double or thereabouts, while many would lose their jobs, while the government can no longer fund services for the needy, while we plunge perhaps into a second Great Depression with safety net programs like Social Security and Medicare rigged with time bombs of their own.
We are sitting on a time bomb.
And yet, in the past 3 years, first they ramped up the amount of money going out and then slashed taxes or the amount of money coming in, then ramped up the amount of money going out even more. Tax cuts can and do promote growth, but the Trump administration claimed these cuts would grow the economy so much they would pay for themselves.
Will get the economy growing more than 3% a year, which they say would pay for everything.
This will pay for itself with growth.
They said 3% growth, and notice how the president kept nudging up the numbers.
And we'll be up to 4 and even 5%. I think you can go to 5 or 6%.
Well, instead of that, a lot of economists in the CBO project growth in the 2% range a year. The president's budget proposal assumes no recessions, by the way, and at least 3% growth every year for a decade. If the president's team there is off by just 1%, that could be yet another time bomb in itself.
And the difference between 2% and 3% GDP is literally trillions of dollars.
Yeah, conservative economists like Reagan's former budget director David Stockman have been sounding alarms about this for a while, which we'll replay here for a moment as I head over to sit down with tonight's guest.
There is no way you're going to cut the corporate tax by $2 trillion over the next 10 years and not pay for it.
Well, Senator Marco Rubio, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
When did the Republican Party stop becoming the party of fiscal restraint, at least in terms of outcomes?
Well, to be clear, I voted against it. And I voted against it for 2 reasons. The first is because they put the debt limit together with it. I thought there were 2 separate issues that should have been dealt with separately. The other is because it makes promises that aren't true. In essence, it's as bad as the numbers look for future deficit spending, it's actually worse, because some of the things they say we're going to do to pay for it are never going to happen. You know, some of the cuts they talk about making over the next 10 years to pay for some of the spending are cuts that Congress isn't going to make. They're fake. And so it's a lie. I'm all in favor of a regular budgeting process. And by the way, we don't have to turn the debt around from one day to the next. We do have to bring it onto a sustainable pattern of growth. And the other part that we're not discussing, and it's a fact, and at some point we're going to have to deal with it, is our debt is not driven by the budget Congress passes. Our debt is driven by spending that Congress has no influence over. Medicare, Social Security, that is mandatory spending. We have to spend whatever the number of people in it and what the benefits they're entitled to demands. I don't want to take that away from anybody. I just think for my generation and younger, there are going to have to be some structural changes to those programs so that they will survive. If not, they will bankrupt themselves, then they will bankrupt America. And no one wants to talk about that, and no one wants to address it. And the President's been clear he's not going to address it. I think that's a terrible mistake. The day of reckoning will come.
Senator Rubio, thank you for your time.
Thank you.